Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Minnesota Golden Gophers, and joining us on the show today is Dylan Callahan Curley. Dylan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Connor. Looking forward to talking about the Gophers.
Before we get started with the team preview itself, Dylan, tell our viewers where they can find your content.
Yeah, right now you can find my content at minnesota.rivals.com, part of the Rivals Network, which recently just got bought by On3. So the content over there is only going to get better in the upcoming months here as Rivals and On3 merge. I believe looking at early July for that. So great time if you're a Minnesota Golden Gophers fan or a fan of any college football team to head over to Rivals right now and subscribe to your favorite team or On3 because you're about to get best of both worlds with On3 and Rivals.
I guess we're going to be seeing more one-word graphics, huh?
Yeah, I think more one-word graphics is right. They've been killing it over there with those.
Those are good.
They definitely crack me up several times a week with those.
Yeah, they are pretty good. Looking on the field for the 2025 Golden Gophers, so there's some production to replace in the quarterback room.
Yeah.
Y'all recently just got a transfer from Boston College and Emmett Moorhead.
Yeah.
Um, is it still Drake Lindsey's job to lose? What's the outlook for the quarterback room?
Yeah, it's Drake Lindsey's job to lose here. I think Moorhead, you look at what he did at Boston College. He was at Old Dominion this past season as well. Didn't play off the top of my head if I remember correctly. But Lindsey, he and Zach Power, the former Georgia Tech quarterback, now at Southern Alabama, competed this spring. Pyron just really struggled, I think, to find consistency both just in normal practices, but also with the new offense. And Lindsey was well ahead of him by the time that spring rolled around. Pyron and entered the portal before spring even came to a close. So it's Drake Lindsey's job to lose here. I think barring an injury or just a really poor camp performance in the fall, Lindsey's going to be the guy. And I think Moorhead really is more so competing with backup redshirt sophomore Dylan Whittaker for that number two job more than anything. But I know Minnesota with Moorhead really just wanted to add depth to that room and an experienced quarterback as well because in Drake Lindsey and Dylan Whittaker, there's only, I think, a total of like 15, 20 snaps between the two. So not much experience in that room. Moorhead brings that experience, gives a little bit of a veteran presence.
With a little bit of inexperience for Drake Lindsey, what's the expectation for him this year?
Yeah, I think Minnesota fans obviously have high expectations, and I think the Minnesota program itself has some high expectations for Lindsay. I think you know, it's okay to have those expectations, but you also have to be realistic. This is going to be a first-year starter just as a redshirt freshman. He did learn under Max Brosmer last year, and apparently he was, glued to Brosmer's hip for most of the year, which is going to serve him really well because Brosmer was a really fantastic quarterback for Minnesota, very underrated. I think for Lindsey, it's going to be, you know, it, th- I think their schedule is going to help him ease into things a bit. There are going to be speed bumps along the way, especially once he enters Big Ten play. I think the expectations for him, in a realistic sense, should just be to, be a capable quarterback who can make, the plays that he should be making on a routine basis. He needs to make those wide open passes, easy catches for the receivers. He needs to hit those timing routes correctly. He needs to do the small things right. There are going to be bumps along the way. He's going to have bad games, but as long as he continues to show improvement throughout the season, I think that's what's going to be big for him. It's not necessarily about 2025 for him and Minnesota. I think this is about building towards 2026 and beyond because he has the potential to be a top end quarterback in the Big Ten, but it's hard to throw those expectations on just a second year quarterback. I mean, we saw, uh, similar guy like a Drew Aller at Penn State, had a really good first year as a starter, but also had some speed bumps along the way. Not saying Lindsey is that caliber quarterback. He has the potential, I think, to be as a strong arm, but as long as he can show those needed improvements week to week, not making the same mistakes over and over again. I think Minnesota fans would be happy with that performance. And that performance with what they have wide receiver and running back should result in a winning record this year.
And you mentioned the schedule and getting up to speed. The first few games are pretty manageable. Buffalo, I mean, not a slouch. I mean, they've really improved last year with their new coaching staff. One of the better MAC teams. Y'all will host Buffalo, host Northwestern State, and then at Cal. And who knows what to expect with Cal this year.
Yeah.
And then a bye week, and then hosting Rutgers. So it's not a incredibly difficult schedule to
Yeah.
start things off. So.
No, yeah, I think, easing when you want to ease a quarterback into things, this is a fantastic way to do so. I mean, Buffalo has been a solid G5 program, but that's a game Minnesota should win, 100 out of 100 times. Northwestern State, that shouldn't be even, it shouldn't even be close. And then Cal and Rutgers, we'll see what those two programs are, but very winnable. But at the same time, that schedule heats up pretty quickly with Ohio State at the beginning of October. So those first four games are going to be really important. We'll see what comes in October, but definitely is a favorable schedule early.
This is the most similar to 2019 kind of schedule I've seen from Minnesota
Yeah,
since then. Because 2019, I mean, the first what, 6, 7 games were all winnable games, and they won some close games, but they got up to speed before the schedule really got difficult in the second half of the season, and that's what it's going to be more like this season. Obviously, at Ohio State, October 4th, but that back half of the schedule, Nebraska at Iowa. We'll see what Michigan State is at Oregon. Northwestern's a winnable game on the road and then hosting Wisconsin. So certainly the second half
yeah.
of the schedule is more difficult than the first half.
It is, but it's also one of those things that one of those schedules where I feel like you can make the argument, depending on how Drake Lindsay performs this season, that Minnesota is the better program, or it could be the better team than everybody but Ohio State and Oregon this year. They have
Yeah.
those capabilities. So I mean, a 10-2 regular season is not necessarily, you know, out of the realm of possibility for this program, depending on how Drake Lindsay performs this year. So in that aspect, he is really kind of the X factor for this Minnesota season.
Well, looking at the receivers that Drake Lindsay is going to be throwing to, so Daniel Jackson and Elijah
Yeah.
Spencer are no longer at Minnesota. They bring in Logan Loya from UCLA, Javon Tracy from Miami of Ohio, Malachi Coleman from Nebraska. Are they likely going to be relying on these transfers here?
They will definitely be relying on Javon Tracy and Logan Loya. I mean, I like those two pickups a lot. I like Malachi Coleman a lot. Obviously, the potential is there. Think that in that for him, it's gonna be a little bit of a process still. Uh, he's obviously a great player, great talent, but still has to kind of refine his game a little bit more before he can make an impact week to week. I think he will have a role in this offense. Minnesota doesn't tend to use a ton of wide receivers during the season.
It's true.
Usually it's 5 to 7 guys record receptions, and out of those 5 to 7, it's really only three, maybe four that are really a big part of the offense. So I think you're when you look at the wide receiver room, it's going to be Javon Tracy, it's going to be Lameek Brockington, and
Yeah.
Logan Loya as those three key guys. It's going to be hard to place Daniel Jackson, one of the best wide receivers in program history. Elijah Spencer, after a really quiet 2023 season, had a breakout performance this past fall and was a really big part of that offense and a big target for Max Brosmer as well. So it's going to be hard to replace those guys, but I really like the floor that Logan Loya brings. I think he's going to be a nice, consistent part of this offense that they can rely to make, to nab 3, 4 receptions for 30, 40 yards a week. Not going to blow up the box short, but going to be a reliable piece of the offense. Javon Tracy has the chance to be a home run hitter. And then Meek Brogginson, if he can stay healthy, has a ton of potential as well. So I think it's going to be those three. And then you're looking at uh, Danielle Hayes, Malachi Coleman, and Christian Driver kind of competing for that number 4 guy in the pecking order for Drake Lindsay this fall.
And the tight end room is oftentimes featured under PJ Fleck teams. Is Gears going to be leading the group this year?
So yeah, I think it will be Jameson Gears. He had a pretty solid 2024 season, really underrated, I think, in that aspect. 28 receptions, 290 yards, 4 touchdowns. Really came on as the season went on. I don't think he's gonna, put up huge numbers. I think he can replicate what he did last year, maybe a little bit more. Not going to see a whole ton of production in terms of receiving from this tight end unit. Mostly going to be used as blockers, but Jameson Gears is going to be that number one tight end. He's going to be their main pass catcher in that room there. And then you'll see the Purdue transfer, Drew Bieber, be a part of that as well. Frank Bierman, and then they have a couple young guys kind of waiting in the wings there who could potentially push those other two for playing time as the season progresses.
So the thing about Minnesota every single year is they have a really strong running game and they normally have a
Always.
lot of depth in the running back room. So Darius
Yeah.
Taylor is back and he's a workhorse.
Yeah.
They also got the guy from Marshall, AJ Turner, but there is a lot of depth behind
Yes.
Taylor that departs mostly due to graduation, a couple or one or two to the portal, I believe. So what does the room as a whole look like? Because obviously, I think we know who the top two are here, right?
Yeah, top two are solidified easy. Darius Taylor, one of the best running backs, not just in the Big Ten, but in the country, in my opinion.
Yeah.
When he's healthy, he can go up against anybody. AJ Turner, Marshall, transfer a home run hitter. If you look at it, he had a lot of big runs for the Thunder and Herd last year, so he'll be a big asset for them. Behind them, you got Cam Davis, another transfer out of Washington, seventh year guy, going to be a a short yardage goal line type running back, coming off a pretty brutal knee injury, I believe, 2 years ago. Wasn't, I think, fully back up to speed last year. We'll see where he is this year, but at at the least, I think you're looking at a short yardage guy there. And then they have a couple younger guys in the fold as well. The younger guy to really know is Fame Ajaboy, redshirt freshman out of Pennsylvania. Didn't play a ton last year, but they're very, very high on what he can bring to the room. They also picked up Vanderbilt running back transfer Johan Cardenas over last month, I should say. He was a true freshman last year, redshirt for the Commodores, so he'll bring some depth to that room as well. Not really sure what to expect from him in the immediate, but definitely somebody who will push for playing time long term there. So those are really the four to know right now. They have two incoming freshmen as well, but don't see those freshmen pushing for playing time in this room this year, especially with Taylor, Turner, and uh, apologies, Cam Davis all fulfilling those top three spots on the depth chart.
Got you. Now, obviously, the running back tandem at Penn State is going to receive a lot of
Yeah.
the glory, and they are arguably the best running back duo in the country. But do you think that Minnesota might have the second best running back tandem with Turner and Taylor in the Big Ten? I know Ohio State and Oregon are always loaded there. They both lose some talent.
Yeah.
Again, they reload every year, but
I mean, I think they have the capabilities of doing so. Like you said, Penn State with Singleton, Allen,
yeah,
those are two, arguably the top two running backs in the Big Ten, period,
yeah.
entering this upcoming season. But Darius Taylor is, in my opinion, top five running back in the conference. And I think what AJ Turner can bring with his home run ability, if he's able to make that jump from the group of five to the Power Four level to the Big Ten, obviously is a quite a big jump for him. But if he's able to make that jump successfully and they find creative ways to use him, and he's able to replicate some of that success, especially ripping off some big plays, it has a chance to be, yeah, the number two tandem in the Big Ten and one of the best tandems in all of college football. I expect the offense for the most part will once again run through the ground game, and they'll throw the ball, uh, their fair share. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's 55% run, 45% pass. It's up on the season, if not a little bit wider. But because with those two running backs, that's what it should be. It should be fun to watch.
And real quick, right back to the receiver room. I didn't have a
Yeah.
chance to ask the question.
Yeah.
Um, do you think there's going to be an alpha, or do you think it's just going to be, spread across five different guys?
I think it's going to be spread across. If I had to make a decision right now, I'd say it's probably going to be Javon Tracy and Logan Loya as the top two guys there. Lameek Brockington can maybe make it a three guy, number one by committee. if he is able to stay healthy and able to find some consistency. But I think it's going to be Javon Tracy most likely as that top guy, and then Logan Loya as that number two, with Brockington and whomever emerges at that fourth guy, kind of being the next two in line there. But I do think if they lose one of Tracy or Loya, Brockington does have that ability to step up and be a productive wide receiver as a number two guy potentially.
Yeah, Brockington certainly showed some potential last year, averaging 15 and a half yards per catch. Is that right? Am I reading that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 15 and a half, 15.7 last year, 14.6 in 2023 and 18 and a half in 2022. So when he gets the ball, he makes things happen quite a bit. He's a big play guy. Just, has to find that consistency a little bit. Missed 6 games in 2023, and then last year did stay healthy for the most part, but behind guys like Jackson and Spencer, he wasn't able to, make a huge impact in the passing attack. But uh, when he was able to, with those 18 receptions, he did make the most of it. I'm looking at it now. He recorded at least one reception in 12 of 13 games and had, I think, 5 or 6 games of 2 receptions, but never had more than 2 receptions in a game last year. So we'll see if he can get into that 3-4 range at times this season.
So this is looking like it's going to be your typical PJ Fleck Minnesota offense that runs the ball probably what 65% of the time. Well, I don't know what the exact percentage is
Yeah.
averaging over the years, but I would think this year it might be like a 60-40 split.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, run heavy. You look at 2023, they had averaged 24 attempts through the air to about 39 attempts on the ground. I think that's what you're more likely going to see here. Last year, they were very much 50-50, 31 and 31, but that was with an experienced quarterback in Max Brosmer, who performed highly at the FCS level before making the jump to Minnesota. And after little bit of a slow start to the season, was really great for the Golden Gophers for much of the last 2 months of the season. So I do think it will go back to what we traditionally saw in 2023, 2022 with the Gophers than necessarily what we saw last year. But if Drake Lindsay impresses early on, that could certainly change as the season progresses. But I'd say to start, you're more likely looking at, close to a 60-40 split.
And the strength, oftentimes, if it's not the running back room for Minnesota, is the offensive line. This was a really talented group
Yeah.
last year, especially in opening holes in the running game. They do lose three starters, and then their backup right tackle, Philip Daniels, I think he's headed to Ohio State.
Yeah.
So, how does the offensive line look, in your opinion?
Uh, I like the potential, but there's a lot of, moving pieces here. Greg Johnson spent last year at center. He's now back at left. He's now left guard after starting his career at guard. So he's gone from guard to center to guard, back to back to back years. Then you're looking at left tackle. You're looking at a inexperienced Nathan Roy, high potential, high upside there, but inexperienced. Or Washington transfer Khalid Tafe, who missed the entire spring with an injury. Ashton Beers is moving from guard to center. And then on the right side, you're looking at likely Marcellus Marshall and Dylan Ray as your as your right guard and right tackle. Both of those guys are new to the program. Marshall transferred in from UCF. Dylan Ray transferred in from Kentucky. And then just last month, they added Purdue transfer Jaden Ball to the mix as well. Don't see him starting this year, but he should be a potential member of that rotation. Should see some playing time. So there is a lot of moving pieces in this offensive line, and it was an offensive line that really was subpar to what is expected from Minnesota offensive line last season. So it's going to be very interesting to see how uh, they perform in 2025 with so many new pieces. They definitely lost a lot of talent in that offensive line room over the offseason. And the depth there is okay, but I would not be confident in the depth necessarily if they were to lose one or two of these guys. So a lot of moving pieces. Really don't know what to expect. And I think, like we said, with the season, with the schedule early on, I think there's a chance they look good early, but we're not really going to know what they are really going to be until that maybe that Cal game, that Rutgers game, and then Ohio State will especially be a big test. So it is definitely a question mark in my mind and definitely a work in progress.
So while the offense gets some of these new players potentially up to snuff early on, the defense will likely be leaned on.
Yeah,
And this is typically a really good group, and it was last year. So we'll start on the defensive line. In terms of production, they lose their top two with Jaw Joyner and then Danny Strigow.
yeah,
Um, so now they did pick up an interesting guy from FCS Stony Brook and Rashawn Lawrence.
yeah.
He probably, I assume, will be asked to step up into a pretty big role. How does this group look?
Yeah, so the defensive line, I like the starting group for the most part. Anthony Smith returns. He has a chance to be a breakout candidate in the Big Ten this year. I mean, he had a pretty big season last year, if I remember correctly. Looking at it now, he had 12 tackles for loss and 6 sacks. He has a chance to really build upon that. I'll be interested to see if he can because Jaw Joyner had a very similar 2023 season, but couldn't build on that really in 2024. And it probably cost him when it came big time when it came to the draft this past year. Anthony Smith has the potential to be a day two draft pick next year, in my opinion. So if he can build upon what he did this past fall, this upcoming season, that would be big for Minnesota and big for him. Devin Eastern returns. He's one of the better, I think, nose tackles in the Big Ten. Jalen Rogan Redden returns as well. So they have three guys with a ton of experience returning in those three spots. The rush end position is going to be hard to replace. They have Lucas Finessi, who could, I think, be a quality player in that role, but I think his upside is a little bit on the lower end. They also have former four-star Jackson Howard in that, as well as a young guy in Carter Mentz who could push for playing time. The depth across the defensive line is still a little bit concerning. They did bring in Rashawn Lawrence, who will have a chance to be in that two deep at defensive tackle there and have a chance to have a quality role for Minnesota. We'll see how he can make that jump. They also brought in Stephen Curtis, a defensive end, another FCS transfer. Uh, and then they have Nate Becker backing up Devin Eastern. But beyond those guys, it is very much up in the air of how the rest of the depth chart can fall. And if Minnesota suffers one or two injuries on the defensive line, it can become very shallow depth wise very quickly for Minnesota. Defensive line, I like the starting group, but very concerned about the depth holding up over the course of a season.
So yeah, that'll be certainly noteworthy and especially in the physical conference like the Big Ten. So yeah, hopefully Minnesota stays healthy up front on the defensive line. At linebacker, Cody Lindenberg was awesome
Yeah,
at his middle linebacker spot all season. He was particularly great at stopping the run.
yeah.
So he's gone. Is it going to be Maverick Baranowski in his role?
Yeah, Maverick Baranowski is gonna step into well, Maverick Baranowski is going to be the middle linebacker, and they brought in Oklahoma State transfer Jeff Roberson to take over that Will spot. Those will be the two main guys at linebacker. Baranowski, we're like Landenberg, will be the leader of that Minnesota defense. He's going to be relied upon to be, uh, the quarterback per se. And he had a pretty quality 2024 season himself: 65 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, and 1 sack. I see him having a big season, perhaps being able to match the production that Lindenberg gave them last season. I mean, he had the tackles for loss and he had the sack total there. I could see a jump up in those total tackles closer to that 90 number that Lindenberg posted this year. Roberson, the Oklahoma State transfer, had a pretty strong 2023 season, 2024 season for Oklahoma State with 58 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. He's going to act as that will linebacker who does a little bit of everything, a little bit more of the playmaker of the defense, while Maverick Baranowski kind of serves as that, uh, the one staying in the middle there, patrolling the middle, while Roberson is going to be, I imagine, more of the guy rushing the quarterback a little bit more, covering the running back, so on and so forth, a little bit more of the athletic linebacker of the two. The depth of linebacker is a little bit better than it is at defense on the defensive line. Uh, Joey Gerlach, Devin Williams is another guy. Devin Williams has been in there in the program what it feels like forever now. One of those classic Minnesota guys. Uh, Not as terribly high ceiling, but a good, decently high floor who provides solid depth at the position. And then they got some younger guys in Matt Kingsbury, Emmanuel Carmo, a true freshman, could push for playing time this year. So I like the depth there. But yeah, going back to the original question, Maverick Baranowski is going to take over that Cody Lindenberg role primarily, while Jeff Roberson is a much needed addition to that unit.
So there's certainly some quality players, especially in the starting lineup here for the Minnesota defense.
Yep.
In the secondary, so I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce his name, but the nickelback I'm expecting a very big year from. Is it Coy?
Parrish. Yeah. So Coy is interesting. I could see him playing nickel because of his just his overall talent. Anybody who watched him play last year saw that one of the best safeties last year in all of the country as a true freshman. I could see him playing nickel because his skill set would translate really well to that role. He would be able to uh, I think flourish in that role, put up big numbers, have a chance to be a game changer in that role. I could also see him staying at safety just because he is such a phenomenal safety. Um, if he doesn't play nickel, it probably is going to be Deontay McMillan in that nickel role. If I had to guess right now, a couple other guys could compete in that role. But I'll be interested to see what they do with Coy. Worth mentioning with Coy as well. He was taking snaps at wide receiver in the spring as well. I think had a handful of snaps last year during games as well. So could be something to watch there with him playing maybe both sides of the ball. A little bit of a Travis Hunter effect there.
And around Coy, how is the secondary looking?
Yeah, I like how the secondary is shaping up for the most part. They have a young cornerback in Zaquan Bryan who flashed around on the field. He's going to have a bigger role, probably a starting role this fall. Uh, he's going to be the one corner. At the other corner, they brought in Jalen Bowden, a North Carolina Central transfer from the FCS ranks. He should be able to, if I get, well, the question, of course, with FCS transfers, can they make that jump successful? If he's able to do so, I think he'll provide some solid play. They have a couple other younger corners who could potentially fulfill that role. Rylan Kelly, Samuel Madu, Evan Redden, Mike Gerald. But Bowden definitely has the experience from playing at the FCS level. I think that experience is going to be big for him. So I think they're going to try as hard as they can to starter this year. At safety, if it's not Coy, you're going to definitely see Kerry Brown in one role. He played opposite Coy last year a lot. Didn't get as much of the press as Coy, but was really, really good when on the field. So I think he's in for a big season. They have Darius Green, a redshirt senior, who's also a part of that room, was banged up most of last year. He brings a nice bit of experience to that room. And then you got Aiden Galsby and Garrison Monroe at free safety as well. Gausby also has flashing on the field. Pretty solid player overall. Nice floor. Garrison Monroe, redshirt sophomore, hasn't played a ton, so we'll see what he can bring when given the opportunity this upcoming fall. They did lose over the off season, but a quality depth piece of their safety room and sorry, Bryson Coleman Bryson, who transferred to North Carolina. He played in all 12 games last year. Probably was going to be in line for a big role, but decided to leave the program this offseason. Ended up with Bill Belichick at UNC. So that was a notable loss. But yeah, like I said, Monroe gonna have a chance to break into a big role. Only played 4 games last year, 24 total snaps last year. Galsby had 9 games played, but over 400 snaps. So he is experienced himself and will have probably a chance to compete for a starting role, depending on what they do with Coy there. But I think Coy's kind of uh, not even kind of is that X factor, is kind of that magic piece of that secondary. I think they're going to put him where they see best need at the time. If that's nickelback for a certain game, I could see him playing nickel in that game. If that's at safety, then he'll play safety in that game, of course. He played mostly free safety last year, spent 3 games at strong safety as well. So, I mean, if he does add nickel to that repertoire of positions, he gives this defense some fantastic versatility.
So you mentioned some potential, if not likely, breakthrough players
Yeah.
from Minnesota this year. Obviously, we expect um, really good things out of the running back room, especially the top two, and then Coy, Anthony Smith. But what's another player you think, if Minnesota has a huge season and someone else ends up having a huge breakthrough season, which player that's not getting talked about right now you think could have a huge year in 2025?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would probably, I'll give you two answers. On offense, I think one would be a guy we talked about a little bit, Lameek Brockington. He has that big playability as we talked about. He's averaging, uh, don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's probably about 16 yards for his career, 15, 16 yards per reception. So if he's able to find consistency, have a breakout season, I can. Sorry, if he's able to find that consistency, build a good rapport with Drake Lindsay, and get over that hump of just 2 catches a game, get to that 3, 4, 5 catches mark. I could see him being a guy who really becomes a game changer on offense for Minnesota because you take those 15 yards per reception, those add up. Those yards add up over 4 or 5 receptions per game. So I'll say him because I think the transfers have been talked about quite a bit. A lot of people may be looking at Malachi Coleman, but I'll go with Lameek Brockington on offense. Uh, Maybe an AJ Turner, just because of that home run ability. Very similar to a Brockington aspect. Not going to get the bulk of the carries. Darius Taylor still get the bulk, but if AJ Turner can, take advantage and make most of his limited carries, then he could be one of those guys. Defensively for Minnesota, uh, I don't think Anthony Smith gets talked about him enough, even though he had those 12 tackles for loss, 6 sacks last year. So I'll go Anthony Smith, and then I'll also slide in a Kerry Brown there because we talked a little bit about him with Coy. He had a fantastic redshirt freshman season last year. You look at PFF's numbers on him. He was Minnesota's fourth highest graded defender per PFF last year, only behind fourth highest, third highest when it comes to guys who played more than 4 games. So out of the key guys last year, he was the third highest rated defender, only behind Coy and Jaw Joyner, who were without a doubt their top 2 guys. So I think Kerry Brown is a guy who's flying on the radar this year, could easily have a breakout season and earn all Big Ten honors this upcoming fall, and perhaps pick up a few interceptions along the way.
And you also mentioned earlier that it seems like it's going to be vital for Minnesota to stay healthy, particularly
Yes.
along the lines of scrimmage. So you discussed the starting defensive line. They got some quality players. The depth might be a little bit questionable, especially behind the two deep. Um, the offensive line, though, is Minnesota confident enough in their starting offensive line, do you think?
Yeah, I think they're confident that once you work out perhaps the early season kinks, early season struggles, that this group has a chance to be a really formidable group. They have all shown, quite a bit of upside at their previous institutions. Dylan Ray, especially Marcellus Marshall and Khalid Tafe have both had some ups and downs, but Marshall, is a fifth, 6 year guy at this point. He has plenty of experience. He was just at UCF and performed well there. So I think he has a chance uh, to to solidify the right side with Dylan Ray this year. I think they're really confident what Greg Johnson can do at left guard, and Ashton Beers should be able to fill in that center spot quite well. Um, Left tackle, I think, is a little bit more of a question mark. Khalid Toffee for Washington last year had his fair share of ups and downs as a little bit of a more unexperienced player, but that was also on a Washington offensive line that did not perform well whatsoever throughout the
Sure.
course of the season. That was a program that struggled just in general. So I can see him with. I think Brian Callahan is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He consistently gets more out of less. Um, I mean, Tafe only allowed 2 sacks last year. Did struggle as the season went on against Big Ten competition. So I do have some questions about him when it comes to entering Big Ten play against the likes of Ohio State, Iowa, Oregon, Wisconsin type teams. But if it doesn't work out with him, Nathan Roy was a very highly ranked recruit coming out of high school. I believe he was a four-star prospect, if I remember correctly. They think he still has a ton of upside as well. So I think out of those two, one of those two guys is going to be able to step up in the role. It's just a matter of who. So I do have confidence in the group, but it is a little bit like the defensive line, where if there is an injury there or two, it, the depth can get a bit shallow quite quickly. So I do worry about that aspect of the Gophers long term this upcoming season.
Well, the Golden Gophers will be among many exciting teams to watch to see like which of those teams in the middle of the Big Ten can surpass and become like best of the rest and look to have a huge season.
Yep.
Potentially, like you mentioned with the schedule, that there's going to be some toss-up games here, and if Minnesota ends up hitting the ceiling with a lot of these individuals that maybe have some inexperience, that Minnesota could have a really good season this year because it's not like they play the majority of the top talented teams in the Big Ten. They have a lot of those
Yeah.
teams that are similar in terms of recruiting rankings because I mean they play at Ohio State, they play at Oregon, but they don't have to travel to the big house. They don't play Penn State, and so those,
Yeah.
especially with what Penn State returns this year, it's not the most difficult schedule in the Big Ten.
No, no, not at all. And, I mean, they don't have to face USC or UCLA, who should be better this season. I mean, after Ohio State and Oregon, I don't think there's a clear-cut, number three team, perhaps. Maybe Iowa, because Iowa always has a high floor, but the Iowa offense is also one of those things where um, who knows what Iowa's offense is still going
Right.
to be. Iowa's offense this year could take it a step up, and if that happens, then Iowa's a really good team this year. If it doesn't, then Iowa, is still the same program that, they could knock your socks off any given week, but they could also you can also knock their socks off any given week. It's very up in the air who they're going to be, but I mean, does Nebraska take that next step this year? I don't see it being Purdue, Rutgers, Cal. I mean, there is no, I think, clear-cut third best team. Wisconsin hasn't been the same program that they wore for the better part of 2 decades. So definitely a schedule that they can take advantage of. It's just going to come down to Drake Lindsey's development this season, obviously, and it's going to come down to staying healthy, especially along the lines of scrimmage. If they can stay healthy in the trenches, I like their depth pretty much everywhere else. They're not the deepest team in the Big Ten at every position, but I think their depth at the other positions, especially the skill positions, is much better than it is in the trenches. So it's just going to be about staying healthy in the trenches. If they get banged up in the trenches on either side, it could be a little bit of a long season for the Gophers. But yeah, I can see really anywhere from probably a 7-5 to 10-2 season for Minnesota. Obviously, going to probably fall somewhere in the middle there, around the 8-4, 9-3 mark. But definitely a schedule that they can take advantage of. And if things break their way, I think could have a pretty good season.
Well, Dylan, really good job on the channel today, and thank you for hopping on with me and talking a little bit of Minnesota Golden Gopher football.
Thanks for having me, Connor.